This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worst-take. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions. You guys have really been showing up for the month of June. I really appreciate that. I hope my content has been very entertaining while we wait. Only about a month left until the Browns are truly back. So we just got to get through these last couple of weeks of June, and then we're going to roll straight through July. Got a ton of content. Daily content planned. As long as y'all keep showing up for it, the content will keep coming. I really do appreciate how y'all been showing up there and how some of y'all been showing up in the memberships, man. Those have been great. I'll be seeing the badges. You guys have a ton of badges now. That's dope. So thank you guys for getting on board with that and also just enjoying the content. And I'm thankful to be able to put out content that y'all have enjoyed so far too. Let's get into the questions. This comes from Brandon Goodman, who says, "Hey Q, I'm going to be honest with you. I am not sufficiently knowledgeable on the intricacies of the varying defensive schemes that are out there. Could you elaborate more on the similarities and differences that we'll see going from Woods to Schwartz schematically? You also mentioned in your last Q&A video that the Browns will have to overcome some bad habits. Were any of these things products of bad scheming? Thank you for your time." Well, one, Brandon, I would say the fact that you are smart enough to acknowledge what you might not be super knowledgeable in really does put you ahead of the pack, because a lot of people will not know stuff but not be willing to admit that. So that's huge, and I do appreciate that. That being said, now I couldn't explain in perfect detail. I'm not Jim Schwartz, right? But what I can explain to you on the similarities of this defense is it's the same shell, right? You're going to see similar shells, different results out those shells, but you're going to see the same shell. When I say the same shell, you're going to see 4-2-5 very often. 4-2-5 is 4 DBs, 2 linebackers, and then 5 down linemen. At times. Oh no, my bad. So you're going to see the same shell. Now, when I say the same shell, what I'm saying is a lot of this defense is still going to be based out of 4-2-5. Now, what's 4-2-5? For those of you who don't know, 4-2-5 refers to the alignment of the different position groups. So 4, that's 4 down linemen. 2, that's 2 linebackers, and 5, that's 5 DBs. 4-2-5 is also referred to as nickel. So what I'm saying is that the Browns are going to be playing primarily out of lighter packages. So they're going to be playing still a lot of 4-2-5. They're going to be playing some dime. They're going to be playing a lot of those shells. Maybe they'll be in base sometimes. When they are in base, it's going to be very similar to what they ran, and their base is still going to be 4-3, 4 down linemen, 3 linebackers. Again, nickel is 4-2-5 or 5 DBs. And then when you hear somebody say dime, that refers to 1 linebacker who's playing a dime position. So that means 6 DBs, 1 linebacker, however you sparse it out. But those are the basic differences between it. Another similarity between what Joe Woods and Jim Schwartz are doing is basically the alignments, the packages, the shells. Those are going to be similar. You're going to be running some cover 3, some cover 1. Some of the zone stuff is going to be similar. What's different is the rules in the zone, how those rules are communicated, and the habits within it, right? So whenever I mentioned last year, when people get frustrated with Joe Woods, and rightfully so because the defense was bad, and they would want to say stuff like, it's the whole scheme that doesn't work. And I would always be quick to correct and say, the scheme is not the issue. The execution of the scheme is the problem, right? Because defensively, scheme is hardly ever really the issue. It's usually the execution of the scheme, because scheme's not that complicated. We have run a ton of these concepts in the NFL Well, not we. I've never been in the NFL. They have run a ton of these concepts in the NFL, and those things have worked if they're executed properly. Football on the defensive side of the ball is less of a guessing game and more of a science. If you run this versus this will work if everybody executes it. The problem with the Browns defense last year wasn't necessarily the scheme. It was that something within it, the communication or whatever, there was something in it that made it very hard for talented players who have done this before to execute even basic schemes, right? We couldn't play cover 2 at some point, like basic stuff that you could do at a very early college level or even some advanced high school teams run these concepts that we could not run in the NFL. The Browns could not run. I'm sorry. I keep referring to the first person, but that is the big difference. The difference isn't that the defense is going to look dramatically different. The what do you call it? The habits of the defense will be a little bit different, right? So they'll be a little bit more aggressive. They will be a little bit more downhill. They'll use the defensive linemen in a little bit more different ways. The linebackers will be used a little bit differently, and the DBs will be asked to do a little bit more man. But the shell of the defense is going to look very similar to what it was. The shell was never the problem. 4-2-5 was never the problem. Nickel, dime, base, these were never the problem. It was the execution or the lack of execution that we were able to get out of talented players that was the issue, and why it pointed at Joe Woods. It's not that Joe Woods' system doesn't work. It's worked many other places. The problem with Joe Woods' system wasn't the system. It was the person that was trying to get the system to run was not qualified to run it. Or not qualified. He was qualified, but he was not able to run it properly for whatever reason. Just not able to do it. So that is what the issue was last year. Now, I hope I answered this sufficiently. I'm going to think about it real quick just to make sure that I did. Now, when I talk about the bad habits, that's another thing. So let me hit to the other part of the question. So the bad habits, these are things that you pick up, not necessarily because a coach told you to do these things. I don't think any of the bad habits they're going to have to overcome or unlearn are because anything the coach taught them last year. It's more or less things you had to do because of a circumstance that start to affect everything else. A good example is, let's think of it like our bodies. And let's think of a bad habit as, let's say you hurt your knee. And instead of getting your knee fixed, because that option wasn't available for you, you have to lean away from your knee, right? So you have to walk with a little bit of a limp. And while you're walking with the limp, you're putting more stress on the other side of your body, and you're causing a little bit of damage there. And it causes you to create some bad habits in order to cope with some of the physical pain that you're dealing with, right? Joe Woods didn't tell any of these players to do any of the bad habits that they're creating, but the environment that they were in last year created some bad habits. What are some of those bad habits? The tendency for this defense and people in this defense to just determine that they're going to make a play without letting anybody else know, because nobody else knows what to do. That's going to be a habit that's going to have to be unlearned, right? Where somebody is supposed to be playing deep third, and instead of playing their deep third, they crash the ball because they want to make a play. And last year, in order to make a play, that's what they had to do. That's going to be a habit that has to be unlearned. Denzel Ward specifically, the habit he's going to have to learn is basically being able to trust his instincts in cover 2 again. Because one of the things that got eroded, I think, in the last few years with Denzel Ward is he does not trust himself in anything that resembles cover 2, whether that be the 2 side of a cover 6. So whenever you run cover 6, you run 4 on one side, cover 2 on the other side. He's usually on the 2 side. He has no trust in himself when he's on that 2 side. The same thing happens with him just in just regular cover 2, where he just does not trust himself. So even if he does get to run cover 2, he might have some of those same issues, those bad habits that he picked up, because sometimes he was told to do this and sometimes he was told to do this, and this created an indecisiveness for him in that very basic play for him, which created these bad habits. So they can come up in a multitude of different ways, right? These bad habits that they picked up from being a bad defense for the better part of the last 4 years, those aren't going away. Those tendencies have to be squeezed out of these guys, or these players have to be replaced. Those tendencies can't be overcame. That's going to take some time. And that's why I'm a little bit hesitant to go gung-ho on where this team's potential is for this season defensively, because I know that they have all of those things to unlearn as a defense. All of those bad habits that they picked up over the last 3 years, they have to squeeze out. And sometimes you don't even know you have a bad habit until you're put in a certain situation. So there's bad habits on this defense that they've picked up over the last 3 years that they're not aware of, or aware of how problematic on the football field that these bad habits can become. So I think a lot of us are kind of like overlooking that, or not really even thinking about that side of it, because we don't think about defensive changes as, hey, there's going to be some bad habits left over from the last guy. But every year this happens, and I'm expecting it to happen, because it would only be natural, right? If we think Joe Woods was so bad and he ran the defense so poorly for 3 years, it would be unreasonable to expect that he did not run it poorly enough to where bad habits weren't formed. Like, we have lamented how badly he has done his job. And if he has done his job as badly as he has over the last 3 years, then there's a lot of bad habits in that defensive locker room that have to be unlearned. Just straight up. Like, that's just the reality of it. As talented as these guys are, there's some bad habits that have to be unlearned. And even the new guys, I don't know what Akbo's situation is, but I do know with like Zadarius Smith and Dalvin Thomason, there might be some bad habits on that side. So bad habits have to be unlearned. They could be a number of things to, we talk about Jed Wills' bad habit of just like stopping after 3.5 seconds. There are some bad habits like that. They're going to have to be unlearned. There's some bad habits on the defensive side of the ball where, guys start panicking on the defensive line because they can't create pressure. So they just start just like cutting against the grain on the defensive line and just trying to get upfield and panicking that way. There is the bad habit of Grant Delpit to try to play up and try to like rob when he's not supposed to be robbing in cover one. That's something that has to be unlearned. Like, these things are going to take time. And they're going to take reps in real life games to fix. Like, you can fix some of this stuff in practice, but the bulk of bad habits, they're just going to be mistakes on game days. And that's why I'm more hesitant to say top 5 defense for them, because they were so bad last year that it would be unreasonable for me to expect that all of those bad habits are just going to erase themselves because Jim Schwartz. And I think that's an unfair expectation to put on Jim Schwartz, is to expect that none of the baggage from Joe Woods is going to carry over to him. Like, he's going to have a significant amount of baggage because of how bad the last situation was to carry over here. So I don't want to put unreasonable expectations on Jim Schwartz because of what Joe Woods did. Like, I think we have to factor in that there's going to be baggage from what happened here over the last 3 years on the defensive side of the ball. I ain't even gonna try to say your username, bro. But hey, Q, are the Browns a legitimate playoff team heading into 2023, or are there still holes that need to be fixed for this team to make a deep playoff run over the next couple of years? No, they can make they're a legit playoff team heading into this year. The issue with the Browns over the last 4 years, since 2018, has been that this is a team that's a quarterback away. That's how we talked about them. And the question is the quarterback already here in Deshaun Watson? That the Browns have been a quarterback away while feeling like they have the quarterback on the roster for like 5 years. Like, it's kind of hilarious how we've been that. But that's the team that we are. When we get good quarterback play, we win a lot of football games. When we don't get good quarterback play, we don't, right? They went 11-5 the 1 year. Baker Mayfield was pretty decent. When Baker Mayfield was playing good ball at the end of his rookie year, they won a bunch of games. At the end of that, they're a quarterback away. If they have good quarterback play, they will be a very good team. Is it reasonable to expect that Deshaun Watson will be good? I tend to think so. And if Deshaun Watson is good, then there's really nothing holding this team back from being good, right? Quarterback has been the thing that's been holding this team back from being good, the inconsistency at the position. That's why you traded for Deshaun Watson. So if you feel like he's going to fill that gap, then there's no reason this team shouldn't be good, because there's not really much else to question roster-wise with this team. The next question comes from Monte, who says, "Hey Q, not sure if you've watched a lot of film on Tillman, but based off of what you've seen, do you think he has potential to take DPJ's spot later on this year? I know it sounds crazy. Deshaun likes to throw 50-50 balls and does well with big receivers who can go up and get it. DeAndre Hopkins, Mike Williams at Clemson. Plus, Tillman has a higher ceiling. Thank you for everything you do, man." That'd be interesting to see. I don't know where Tillman's going to be. And again, I don't want to put unfair expectations on Tillman, but I think there's a possibility. There's a world where, how Deshaun Watson plays, it might be more favorable towards somebody like Cedric Tillman because of the skill set that he does have. And you can point to every single stage in Deshaun Watson's career where he's succeeded, where he's had somebody similar to that he could just throw it up to. Now, I don't want to say that Deshaun Watson is just limited to being successful with those guys, but those guys have been a part of like, hey, when Deshaun Watson's at his most dangerous, he has somebody who can go up and get a football. And that's one of the things that I've been saying this team needs for a long time is, hey, they need a big guy who can go up in the end zone and make a play on a 50-50 ball, because right now we don't have that. Donovan Peoples-Jones is a big guy, but he doesn't box people out in the end zone. Like, he'll make a nice toe touch grab or he'll make a nice diving catch on the sideline, but he's not necessarily throw him a fade and watch him come over the top and catch a football guy. And if you don't believe me, there's been like 2 plays in his whole career where he's done that. And both of those, I think, were Hail Mary situations, right? But when we're talking about regular end zone, like throw a fade, pop up, go ahead, get your feet in, that's not where he excels at. That doesn't mean that DPJ is not useful, but it does mean that, hey, in those situations, you might want to put Cedric Tillman in. So if he's ready for that early, there's a role for him and he could really succeed in that role. So I think it's a possibility, but I'm not going to sit here and expect it. Next one comes from Basher, who says, "Q, keep bringing in the good stuff. Listen, I think JOK is going to have a great year, but Walker and Taki are both coming off knee injuries. Don't you think we're a little thin?" Here's what I'll say about the linebacker position. I don't think I've communicated why I'm kind of indifferent on the depth at the linebacker position, because it's not that I think extraordinarily high of Anthony Walker or Taki. I think they're both serviceable guys. It's just, I think the difference between Anthony Walker and Siyaki Taki versus getting somebody, off the street who could play those roles is not that much different, right? Like, how much different was Reggie Ragland to Siyaki Taki? They're not that much different when they were out there. The difference at that position and its effectiveness, and I kind of think of linebacker as the running back equivalent to the defense, because a lot of what the running back does is kind of determined on what happens in front of him. A lot of what a linebacker is able to do, it's determined on what happens in front of him, or at least most linebackers. So if you have good defensive line play, you should be able to not really worry about what your linebackers are going to look like, right? And I can point to countless examples of teams that, really just stopped gambling at the linebacker position, went with something very average, and it ended up working out for them. Remember the 14-2 Ravens? They really turned a corner defensively once they just went with LJ Fort, who was very old at that. Well, not very old, but he was very much done in that time. Josh Bynes, and that ended up being fine for them. So my thing with the linebacker position is, Anthony Walker and Siyaki Taki are both coming off injuries. Yeah, that I could see where that could be a problem, but also I don't think replacing those guys is going to be that difficult. Now, Walker might be a little bit more difficult because he plays Mike, but in this defense, we're not doing as much through the mic, and we're not doing as much complicated calls, and we're not trying to communicate all these different things. The mic's not going to be as important. So even that stuff, I just tend to think that the linebacker, look, they have a role to play, but I don't think that role is significantly hard to fill during the course of a season if you need to. So that's why I'm not really freaking out about it. This one comes from CTG Cement, who says, "Q, the Browns are making the final touches on the 53 roster with spots in there. What do you think about Siyaki Ika and his chances of making the roster, and why?" He will make the roster. Yeah, he's going to make the roster. Like, I know I'm not the biggest fan of Siyaki, but like, he's going to make the roster. No doubt in my mind. And he'll make the roster because he's a 3rd-round pick. Cody Donkey says, hey, Q, do you think it's possible for the defense to have 5 players who have more than 5 or equal to 5 sacks? Myles Garrett, yes. Za'Darius Smith, yes. Double O, maybe. DT, probably not. Like, maybe if you think Maurice Hurst or Perrion Winfrey's going to have a breakout year, that's 4. And then, so Miles, ZD, Double O, a defensive tackle. Yeah, maybe a linebacker. Like, if you think JOK can get 5 sacks, then maybe. But I would say that's probably a high number. But it's not impossible. I just don't think they're going to be operating that cleanly to be able to have that many sacks. And we were talking about like 25 sacks at that point, if people just hit the minimums. And we're talking about guys who are going to hit above the minimums. Like, also, yeah, I think about it. Like, if Myles Garrett is out there, he's going to eat up a lot of the sack volume because he's so athletic and he can just eat up a lot of different like sack opportunities from other guys. That like if he gets 18 or 20 sacks, there's just not going to be a lot for everybody else to eat off of, right? If we're talking about Myles getting 20, like anywhere from 16 to 20, and Za'Darius getting anywhere from 8 to 12, like how much is there left for everybody else if you have 2 guys that proficient at finishing plays, getting sacks? You know what I mean? Like, unless you're going to be one of the most dominant defenses in the NFL, I don't know if I can go all the way over there. KJ says, if we win the division but only win 1 playoff game, do you think the fan base will live with that? Do you think they'll call for everybody's job? Personally, I say we keep our core and productive players that we can and build on that opportunity as fast as possible. Look, here's what I'll say. Hypothetically, my answer to that is going to be irrelevant because what's going to matter isn't the base set of facts in front of us. What's going to matter in what you're talking about, which is a very emotional thing, right? How the fan base will react is how it happens, right? If the Browns win the division, win a playoff game, and lose to the Kansas City Chiefs, I don't think anybody's tripping. If the Browns win a division, win a playoff game, and blow a 20-point lead to the Jacksonville Jaguars, all right, some people are going to be upset about that. If the Browns win a playoff game, get somehow the 1 seed, also win a division, and then they blow the conference championship game to like the Chargers or the Ravens or the Bengals or somebody, and they blow it in some embarrassing way, people gonna call for jobs. It's an emotional reaction, is what I'm saying. And that's gonna rely more on how you lose that game than if you lose that game, if you know what I mean, right? There are ways you can do that exact set of things and nobody's going to be upset. We actually be hopeful after that. Because like, let's say you win the playoff game, but Deshaun Watson goes down in that playoff game. And then the next game you have to play with like Josh Dobbs and you lose it. Nobody's going to be tripping about that. Hell, what if you almost win with Josh Dobbs? And then all of a sudden we're going to be real excited for next year. But if you win that playoff game, and then you lose it because Deshaun Watson throws 5 interceptions versus the Kansas City Chiefs, it's not going to be the same tone in the offseason. It's how you do it, not if you do it or what you do. It's how you do it that changes everything. And that's the truth about that. You know what I mean? The next one comes from Praise the Sun, who says, hey, Q, with how competitive of a division we are in, how many wins do you think the Browns need to make the playoffs? I always say it's 9. 9 will get you into contention. If you have more than 9, the better. But 9 is about what you need to get into the playoffs. Every year, a team gets into the playoffs with 9 wins. It could be you. That's the baseline. That's a bare minimum that you need in the AFC to get in. 9. That's it for today's Q&A. Have a great day. Have a good night.